Hello, Cuna. So, if you have any interest or want to know what the general process is on how bills get passed, how law is made in Idaho, I do recommend that you check out this video on. You can find it on YouTube. Just type Idaho Freedom TV and Legislator 101-2024. I had a chance to listen to it live and it was great. And if you're bored, you just 2x speed it. That's what I highly recommend. Always 2x or 1.5 if you can't follow along. In this one, I'm going to do 1.5 speed. Basically, this is a question that I asked. I had three questions related to business, but I'll just let them speak about it. Oop, need to unmute. Here we go.
Okay, we have three questions from Jefferson, but we might just have to get through them one at a time. The first one is corporate income tax collected in the general fund for the 2022-2023 fiscal year was $1 billion. Have you seen an analysis to see if the Crony capitalist budget items such as the 130 million launch program, the grocery tax, etc., exceeded or were less than the 1 billion in taxes paid by the corporations?
So I haven't done an analysis of corporate income tax, and I don't have the figures off the top of my head. It's a very good question because things like the launch grant, and that's about 80 million. You have to go and actually look at all the tax exemptions. And there's a book, a general fund revenue book, and it lists all the sales and income, individual and corporate income tax exemptions. There's some very big ones related to investing in large facilities, and some of them include investing in data centers. And actually, those are very large. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars, and actually by far exceed the launch grant, which is just an expenditure. So it's very hard to see those. It's a very good question because what you're not seeing the unseen, meaning the money never came in, and you have to actually go and add all those back, which is different with the launch grant. We see that there's a line item for 75 million, and it's going to help the large businesses that need certain types of jobs. Not all businesses. You say, aha, but we haven't done a recent analysis of that. I can certainly point anyone to the data so you can look at that and add it up. I'll give you another example. Large hospitals like St. Luke's and St. Al's, they're considered nonprofit, so they pay no federal or state income tax. Their property taxes are exempt from tax, which is a shift to the rest of us. And then they don't pay sales tax when they buy medical equipment. So when they buy an MRI, they don't pay 6% on that. So yes, the Crony system has absolutely led to carve-outs for a lot of businesses that are far bigger than the money spent on the launch grant.
Absolutely.
Jefferson's second question is, what is the IFF's position on the rights of corporations to have any say on how their 1 billion in taxes are spent?
Well, I mean, when you say how they're spent, everyone has a First Amendment right to their opinion. And this is part of the problem, I think, with modern politics, is that it isn't so much. So let's say you're a large corporation and you hire a lobbyist. Well, should you be prohibiting them? Well, maybe then they don't hire lobbyists, but they use the Chamber of Commerce or they use something. So, it's pretty hard to say that a corporation shouldn't have, a voice at the table because, all right, if you limit companies, do you limit labor unions? I would say you'd have to. But here's the thing to also understand. When corporations hire lobbyists, they actually have to disclose that. But governments hire lobbyists and governments lobby themselves. And we talked about the budget process. That whole presentation is they're basically lobbying for more money for their agency. So we actually have looked at that. And if you told the University of Idaho, for example, has a government relations person, well, they'll say that's not a lobbyist. It's somebody who just explains how the University of Idaho works, whatever. And if you said you can't hire lobbyists, they would just call the person a different name, or they'd say the person's assistant to the president. So then you basically are saying, well, then they shouldn't be able to show up. Well, who's they? Is it the CEO of the company? Is it an employee of the company? Is it a lawyer, a representative? So I don't think that's the way you're going to fix it. But what I do think, if you take a position which IFF has taken, which is tax cuts should be for everyone. In other words, if you're going to cut income tax, it should be across the board, not carve-outs. The way you end a lot of this is to get rid of the carve-outs. And the reason that would help is that a lot of corporations realize that a tax cut as big as they're getting for everybody probably wouldn't be affordable. Therefore, it wouldn't pass. So they would have to go for a smaller cut for everybody instead of a big cut for themselves. The reason carve-outs are so powerful is it can tremendously benefit a concentrated group of industries and not cost nearly as much as if you're giving a tax cut to 1 million people. And so I think that's why you really need, at the end of the day, you need good legislators. I mean, one of the reasons we did the Freedom Index, we negatively rate cronyistic carve-out bills. And you need legislators who are going to stand up to that. But to say that corporations shouldn't be allowed to lobby, it would just be very difficult to enforce because you'd basically would have to say they can't speak.
Okay, well, we're at 8 o'clock. Do you want to take one more question or?
I think we could take another.
We'll take one more.
Okay, the last question from Jefferson is, if the federal government were to collapse and all federal funding suddenly stopped, how would Idaho's government agencies respond to the lack of funds?
Well, that'll be a short answer. I mean, Medicaid would collapse, and you'd have a systemic collapse of the hospital system. I think we could operate our schools. You know, you would certainly see far fewer. There are a lot of teachers who are supported with federal dollars, professors, a lot of government workers. So, I mean, the federal government is not likely to collapse in the sense that it would pay, you know, $0 to states. But if it had a structural realignment, it would have a very big ripple effect. And I think one of the areas you'd see it first is the medical system. So in Idaho, our big hospitals get more than half their revenue from Medicare and Medicaid. All the fancy buildings you see, St. Luke's, St. Al's, that's really supported by federal largesse. So I think the biggest hit would be to our medical system. And then, of course, you've got federal land agencies, but I think we could manage the land better, so that wouldn't be a problem. So yes, it would. I think where it'd be most dramatic would be in the medical system, and then secondarily in the education system, which actually, in many ways, the education system would go back to before a lot of federal involvement, and it operated a heck of a lot better.
And to build on that, Fred, too, in analyzing all of those bills last year, what I saw is that the agencies that had the greatest share of federal dollars was actually all the different divisions within the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. And so it's not necessarily just the medical system, but the health industry in its entirety. And it's because it's really subject to a lot of mission creep, I think. So you look at the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, and they have programs where they're building trails now and funding transportation systems and doing all of these other things that really have nothing to do with healthcare or vital records or birth certificates or things that they are supposed to be dealing with as a state agency. And so, and all this is funded by federal money. It gets put up as a grant, and then the department absorbs it. They create a new program, and they tuck it in one of their bureaus, and it just takes off. And so, I think you would see a sizable reduction in the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. I agree with you that the education system would probably continue to operate, and we probably have a really hard time with these road projects and water projects that Governor Little has been touting in his budget. He says that we're not waiting for the federal government to come fix our infrastructure, but the problem is that he's spending federal dollars to do it. And so I think that Idaho would struggle substantially if we were to lose that 40% suddenly, but I also agree with you that it's rather unlikely there would be structural cuts that would reduce it, and they would start with the healthcare industry.
Well, that's all the time we have tonight.
Okay, so I mean, that last question was just particularly interesting to me because you hear a lot from like the Freedom Republicans that, well, I mean, it's just clear. I think Idaho will be better off, and then also keep in mind all of those federal dollars that are sent to Washington D.C. You know, when you have an invasion going on in the South, Idaho will actually have its own sovereign rights to be able to enforce its own borders. And then I think it's about 65% of the land of Idaho is federally owned. So that just kind of goes off on the discussion about, you know, about the concern about the federal government collapsing. And it's just like, well, don't save it. It's better if it collapses. Idaho will be better off, and I think the numbers reflect that. So, all right, well, that's about it. Oh, I wanted to show this because that was related to the business question. This does not really do it. I need to reformat this image. But basically, you have 181, which is that green sliver. This is the number of jobs. So 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. It's about, you know, a quarter each. And then here are the number of businesses that do it. So the issue with Idaho is that it's very much kind of like the top 181 companies pretty much run, you know, they have 25%. They create 25% of the jobs. I don't know what that is like in the rest of the U.S., but I mean, maybe that's a normal skew. You know, actually, I'll probably need to take a look at that to see how that works. So basically, it's like 0.2%. Like you could see here, the green line is just a small sliver, creating 25% of the jobs. Actually, it's 27%, and you know, they obviously have a lot of influence, and they're job creators, and you definitely want them in Idaho creating the jobs. So, but you know, to the degree that you know you want that stuff going back, you know, pushing back, and then also you have it's just a much larger discussion. Anyway, have a good one. Bye-bye.